in terms of a fragmented ecosystem, that is correct, right? And I think 3 years from now, one of our biggest moats are going to be interoperability across the different countries that that we're building in.
Welcome to our latest episode of our podcast on FinTech and Web3, where we're delighted to host a founder based here in Dubai, Mo Aziz. Mo, welcome.
Hey, Ronit, how's it going? Thank you very much for having me on.
We're going to discuss your new business or newish business, Pluto, in a second. But before we do that, Mo, let's zoom out and go back to the origin of your startup journey. When did you decide, I want to become an entrepreneur, I want to be a founder? Talk a little bit about that history and background.
That's a great question. So I actually started off my career as a freelance photographer and a filmmaker. This was back in 2012, 2013, far away from the world of payments and fintech. And so, I would say that was my first venture. And eventually that transitioned into drone filming and drone photography back in 2012, 2013, when majority of the people around had probably not seen a drone that recorded video. So that was a starting, right? And then transitioned through different chapters of my life, building a drone filming business to spending, where, funnily enough, the biggest contracts I scored at the time were for filming camel races using drones. But anyway, from camel races to eventually spent a little bit of time dabbling in the crypto world in 2017. Supposedly made a lot of money, but lost everything and went broke in 2018 after that bull run and the downfall. But what kind of still remained after was newfound love for the world of payments and finance. And that's where it's been it's been fintech number one and now fintech number two.
Fintech number one, is that Dappy we're talking about?
That is correct.
So tell the audience about what Dappy was, what led you to build Dappy, and more importantly, what was that experience like? What was that experience like in building both the highs and the lows?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in the life of an entrepreneur, you have highs and lows every other day, or sometimes even on the same day. You wake up thinking, you wake up feeling like you're on top of the world. You go to sleep feeling horrible, and that's just how it is, right? It's the nature of the game. So Dappy for me was obviously extremely exciting and interesting because it was technically my first venture-backed startup, very different than running and operating a freelance filming business. Can you hear me okay, by the way? It seems like my internet is choppy. Okay, cool. So the way Dappy came along, the backstory there is that it was literally us trying to find a solution for ourselves internally. For context, for the audience, Dappy is an open banking platform. I'm going to dive deeper for those of you who haven't heard of that term before. But essentially, at the time, I was trying to build a consumer finance tool, so a hybrid between personal financial management and peer-to-peer money sending. So very Mint, Venmo, cross in one place. You've got a ton of them now, but we're talking about building this back in 2017, 18, where there wasn't much in the consumer finance space. And then very quickly, it became very evident to me that the lack of financial infrastructure would make it impossible for me to build what I was trying to build. The first couple of bank integrations that we built at Dappy was really for ourselves, but then it just became very evident that there were tons of other entrepreneurs and tons of other platforms that also needed bank connectivity, and that's how Dappy eventually came about. To dive into the highs and lows, right? I think this is probably a bit more generic, not just at Dappy, but even today, right? I think the big key difference operating a venture-backed company, and especially an early stage company, is that your time window is super short at all times. And because you're trying to do so much in a short time window, right? You've naturally got a massive checklist of wins and losses, right? And every win on there is a mini dopamine hit, and every loss over there takes you all the way down. So And this is across everything, right? Do we have enough money in the bank? Have we just closed this new investor? Have we closed this new company? Is this new product out or not? Is it working? Is something breaking? So it's just the combination of everything.
And Mo, I think when we met earlier this week, you were saying to me, you were the first or one of the first companies, startups from this region to go to Y-Combinator.
Yeah, I believe we were, the first or the second from the region to go to Y-Combinator back in 2019. Yeah.
What was that experience like? What was it like being there in YC? What were like the big learnings? What did you think? Oh wow, if I'd stayed at home sipping tea with Gaurav, I'd have never learned this.
No, I think there's definitely a ton to learn just having tea with Gaurav for sure. So I would,
absolutely. We're gonna do a syndicated TV series, sipping tea with Gaurav.
Coffee with Gaurav.
Coffee with Gaurav.
Look, when we went to Y Combinator, YC was very different than now in the sense that the batch was a lot smaller, right?
Okay.
I think about 70-ish companies, right? 70 or 80 companies versus now where you've got several hundred. And, in more recent times, getting into Y Combinator has been different in the sense that, you've got virtual interviews, etc. There was no virtual interview at the time over Zoom or Google. And I think the experience for me started off from that first interview where you're flown to San Francisco. It was, this was my first time in SF. And you're then sitting across 4 YC partners, and they almost purposely sit all on one side of the table and you're on the other side of the table, right? So it's very, it can be slightly daunting and intimidating. And you've got 10 minutes where you got a bunch of, it's just rapid, like a bunch of questions are rapidly fired at you, right? So I think that's where the experience started. Getting into Y Combinator, I think the other thing with
what do they ask you in that 10 minutes?
So at the time I'd done a ton of research and I just thought through everything they can possibly ask. Again, there are only so many possible questions an investor can ask you about the business, right?
Yeah.
So essentially in 10 minutes they want to know everything. Actually, you know what, I've got a pretty interesting story there. So in those 10 minutes, rapid fire everything from your business model, how you make money, who your customers are, where you see this company going, what's going to happen next, what's going to happen in a few months, bam, 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 right? Nonstop. The interesting thing is this went on until, hey, you seem to be potentially building a great company, but who's going to use you, right? Because again, we applied to Y Combinator as a pre-revenue, pre-product, pre-everything company. And one of the names that slipped, at the tip of my tongue was Kareem. And I'm like, and Kareem is building Kareem Pay. Fun fact, Kareem Pay never used Appy. Fast forward to today as well. They were supposed to, but I think they managed to get access to some pretty interesting underlying infrastructure over time. But that's a whole different story. Now, when I'm about to leave, Michael Seibel, who was the CEO until quite recently, he stops me and he goes, listen, in the next 24 hours, could you send over the LOI from Kareem? And and now this is the deciding factor to get into Y Combinator, right? So I go back and at the time I had briefly met with one of our now common friends, Junaid, who was the CEO at Kareem Pay at the time, right? I actually didn't know him at all. I just I just knew him over email at the time. And I sent him an extremely needy email saying, hey, listen, here. And again, I was just straight up and honest. I'm like, I'm here at Y Combinator. I've told them that, sorry. It's so annoying. You put your iPhone on silent, but it still rings on the computer. So anyway, I sent him this extremely needy email saying that, hey, look, we're at Y Combinator. We're almost in. Here's what I've said. And, if you guys sign, I can get into the program. Right? And interestingly enough, within the time frame, he signed, and that was the entry into Y Combinator.
Oh wow! So he sent an LOI over, and there you are.
Yeah, he let me know that this was very unconventional, and this isn't something that Kareem would do. But yeah, I guess that worked out.
And then obviously for a variety of reasons, Daffy wasn't to be, and you went on to Pluto. Could you talk about that journey? Sort of going from, okay, this is not going to work, or it's not for me. It's not for Mo, I'm going to do something else. Talk about how going from that venture one or enterprise one to enterprise two, startup two was like.
Sure. So I'm still extremely bullish in the space that Dappy operates in. And I think at the end of the day, if the picks and shovels aren't there, then you can't build buildings, right? And as an infrastructure play, I still think infrastructure is key to actually, to the rest of the fintech ecosystem, the rest of the fintech ecosystem that's being built on top. For me, the decision to move on was primarily around personality and vision conflict with co-founders. So it was primarily around non-compatibility. So that's the first piece, and then made the move onto Pluto again. Why Pluto, if that's your question, and why have we started off with a product that targets finance teams and a platform that helps them, that helps them with their payment workflows and movement of money. You see, while I was at Dappy building out infrastructure, one thing that became extremely evident to me was in this part of the world very specifically, which is, where again, in recent times, we've seen a ton of money pour into tech companies, but on a more macro standpoint, comparing to North America and the UK, etc., the tech ecosystem is still fairly nascent. And I saw an extremely large opportunity in the number of businesses reaching out saying, hey, listen, can we automate this part of our payment workflow? And it was always some or the other business payment workflow that required automation. But the majority of these businesses weren't businesses that were ready to, ready to consume APIs. They weren't technology companies. And keeping that in mind, at Pluto, we're building a platform first business where we're building a business for the rest of the 90%. The play we're doing today is just one wedge. The future vision is to eventually take on every payment workflow that a business, interacts with. So yeah.
And maybe one last question before handing over to Gaurav. The idea for Pluto was, just dig a bit more to the genesis of that. Was that, you'd seen some of the maybe US-based companies in this space, well, that exists there. Maybe the MENA region needs its own version of whatever, Brex or whoever, Ramp, or did you think, hey, I've got friends of mine in finance departments or in companies asking me, this is a problem, I wish it could be solved. Which, or maybe some other combination, what was it that Layson said took you from, you went from, drones and camel racing to open finance and infrastructure to, it's another kind of infrastructure, but it's, expense management, workflow management. I'm just curious how that last jump happened.
Totally. So I think, so a couple of things, right? One is while building infrastructure, I became extremely passionate about the world of B2B payments. And this was purely, the byproduct of interacting with businesses on a daily basis from whom, my first calls were literally problem calls, right? Hey, you have this API product. We're having a problem paying out our drivers. We're having a problem paying out suppliers, et cetera, right? So, those conversations with customers and just hearing firsthand problems in the B2B payment space overall is what ignited, passion for B2B payments. Aside from that, again, over my last couple of ventures, even though they weren't venture-backed businesses, they were, more of SMEs. I'd experienced a lot of these issues firsthand. At the time when I was running the company, I still remember countless times, just giving various team members personal cards and giving them cash to go purchase equipment every time something broke, something got damaged at a project and so forth. Now, in terms of how does this compare to our North American counterparts or global counterparts, So on one hand, I had a ton of learnings firsthand from customers in this market. Two was that I'd experienced a lot of these pain points myself firsthand while building different companies. And three, fun fact, just before I built Pluto, I almost joined Ramp or Plaid as an employee. I was interviewing at both places, in fact, just before kicking off Pluto. So in that window between Dappy and Pluto, a time came where I said, you know what, I think I'm just gonna, take the back seat for the next couple of months or maybe a year or two, and then come back to building again. And at the time, I actually got extremely deep into the space while interviewing for Ramp. And at the same time, I was also interviewing for a product role at Plaid, again, very specifically for, around the B2B payments realm. And it so happened to be that I came back to Dubai from the US, for context. So I was in the US at the time. I spent all of 2021 in the US, right? I happened to come down to Dubai in the end of 2021 for my sister's wedding. And, it just felt like this was the right time. And now that I was so deep into each one of these products, I uh, I still remember. In fact, I pinged Gaurav. I was down over here. I pinged Gaurav. We go for a walk at the beach at Kite Beach, and I still remember the conversation with him was still, "Hey, I think I'm going to go and build this company." This was, I think, somewhere in the last week of October. Um, and yeah, I mean, part of it at the time was just intuition. I'm like, no one's truly solved for the region, right? Yes, today we're seeing a ton of competitors in our space pop up, but I mean, everyone's fairly nascent and new, right? Um, so that was the beginning, and both Ramp as well as the founders of Plaid invest in Pluto.
Awesome, awesome. There's not so much sipping tea with Gaurav, it's walking Kite Beach with Gaurav. That's what we're
I'm never gonna live that down.
walking Kite
Go
Beach.
for a walk on the beach with Gaurav.
No, flying kites. So the startup stories of Gaurav, flying kites, Kite Beach walk.
Why not?
Gaurav, come into the conversation properly. Over to you, my friend.
Hey, brother. Hey. Listen, it's good to see you, Mo, here. It's good to see you again, and obviously Ronit as well. It's always good to have three heads having these conversations, and our listeners will appreciate the perspectives we wanna bring to your journey, right? I mean, now we're at Pluto. I wanna jump in on what it is right now. And if I say, Pluto, we've talked about Brex, we've talked about Ramp. Now, there are people out there who are listening to us. Some will be very familiar with Brex and Ramp. Some will not, right? So an idiot's guide to Pluto. Sum it up. Tell us how it is. Summarize it. What is the easiest way to tell us what is Pluto?
Sure. So, just for super simplified context, right? Across the region, excuse me, one major pain point is that, while businesses incur operational expenses on a daily basis, the reality on the ground is that a huge chunk of this is either being done in the form of businesses distributing cash to employees, or employees using their own cards to incur business expenses, or let's say for things like marketing spend, etc. You've literally got employees chasing each other for that one-time passcode that comes to only one mobile phone at the office. And so, on one hand, accessibility to funds to actually pay for business, to pay for those business expenses is completely broken. And then two is on the accounting side of things, as you can imagine, because you've got cash, you've got personal cards, you've got all these different mechanisms of paying for expenses every day. The accounting side of it becomes an absolute nightmare, where you've now got people, carrying a ton of receipts in their pockets. You've got a bunch of back and forth between different tools. At Pluto, what we do, we make this whole process a breeze. A business can literally connect their bank account and create unlimited company cards in milliseconds, allocate them to any employee, set spending limits, and we automate the process of collection of receipt all the way down to it being reconciled to pushed into the accounting software. So it's literally taking the operational spending component for both recurring and non-recurring spending and making that dramatically easier.
Thanks for that. And when you look at something like this, right? I mean, it sounds like a wonderful story, but who's using Pluto, right? And what I mean by when I say who's using Pluto, I know you've defined the problem statement that you're solving, but what kind of a business is using Pluto? Because obviously, and I'm saying this obviously, it might not be obvious at the outset, larger businesses that have larger cash handling will have larger issues and pain points to solve. And I can imagine they would find a solution like Pluto extremely useful. But let's go down the corridor further down. And I have two questions. One is about the bigger businesses that adopt you. And then I want to understand also, what's the smallest size business that would actually care about using Pluto? Is it someone that has 4 employees? Is it someone that has 10 employees? Is it someone that spends, trying to distribute cash management up to 1,000 dirhams a month, 5,000 dirhams a month? Because at some point there must be a threshold for you as well, because there must be an onboarding process. There must be a customer engagement process. Or is it as simple as someone goes online, goes to your website, signs up a form, and they can be live themselves? I mean, there must be a process to this, correct?
Totally. So I think, to answer the first part of your question, which was around who actually uses Pluto, right? The majority of businesses we target, excuse me, I've just got a horrible throat today. So the majority of businesses we target happen to be, between the 50 and 500 employee range today. And I think you are absolutely correct in the sense that the bigger a business, the more challenging, the bigger business, the more problems they've got as well, right? Where from like a finance team standpoint, you see the biggest piece is it comes down to workflows and processes. In a very small company, a lot of these decisions are made literally over the table, where you want to spend on a new sofa at the office, right? You yell across the table and pick up the phone and place an order. Now, as soon as you've got a slightly larger company, here you've got departments, you've got you've got finance team members, you've got managers, etc. And like with all of these different stakeholders in there, there's an element of collective decision making and often a hierarchy that a lot of these businesses, what is often known as the approval matrix, right? Now, with Pluto, aside from helping businesses with just digitizing cash spend and empowering teams to spend online, be it on ads or on software or on different purchases, there's an element of digitizing all these workflows. So in this larger business, for instance, typically you've got a ton of papers printed, wet signatures, Excel sheets, back and forth emails, WhatsApp messages. What we do is, we're fusing together a smart company card, the ability to distribute company cards to different team members, visibility on where that spending is happening, control because you're able to actually set different spending limits, etc. And then, all of that fused together with an element of accountability and, having all of your approval workflows in a single place. And then,
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
So the other part, the other part was around onboarding, right? While there are a lot of platforms out there where you can just go online, sign up, and start using the platform right away, at Pluto, we are slightly more careful in terms of the customers whom we onboard. Again, it's still extremely easy, right? But at the end of the day, as you mentioned, right, there is a cost to serving each one of these businesses. Every business whom we onboard, there's a cost to customer service, right? And we pay a lot of attention to customer success and just customer support overall, where there's always someone available to help you. So we also want to make sure that businesses who are coming on the platform are businesses for whom we're truly solving pain points. In terms of what is a process, there's a process to follow, which essentially is, where we essentially follow the guidelines by the Central Bank of the UAE, in accordance with our banking partners, etc.
Okay, and so what's the typical time it takes for someone to sign up onto Pluto? And also the second part of my first question was, what's the smallest sized business that would benefit from using Pluto that you're seeing today? Are you seeing companies with 5-10 employees as well adopting Pluto? So those two questions would be great to explain to our listeners.
Absolutely. So we actually have, we've got, while a lot of the focus is on the 50+ employee business, there are a ton of smaller businesses as well where they're 5, 10, 15, 20 employees, right? And what we've noticed is that businesses in this category are predominantly those who either have a fairly high marketing spend, or they've got, while they're while they're small teams, there's a lot of traveling happening, or there's a use of a lot of different software tools. Now, in these scenarios, again, even if you're a small team, even if you're 6 or 7 people, um, and the fact that you can't distribute cards amongst yourselves becomes very challenging. So the problem we're solving for there is a little bit different. Like, we believe that we're solving a deeper pain point for the larger business, but even for the smaller business, essentially what we're doing over here is we're being used as a tool to empower those members with spending power, where right now, um, there's one company card moving around. There's still a ton of cash usage or personal card usage in these businesses, right? If that makes sense. And then your next question was, if you could just repeat the next question.
It's okay. It's okay. Let's talk about how you guys differentiate in the market, because my understanding is there are very similar businesses to Pluto which have come up. I mean, as new technology companies as opposed to services businesses. And then at the same time, you have the incumbents, the giants, right, servicing the market. So step one is, what's the difference between Pluto and somebody else today that's already offering this from, say, the bigger banks, or Amex, to an example, or something else, right? And what's the difference between you and the competition that's come up in the market on both sides?
Sure.
So those are two questions.
So a couple of things, right? Now, there is competition coming up, but again, for the most part, majority of the players in the space are fairly new. The other thing is that comparing with American Express, etc. Again, American Express is, I would say, the OG corporate card company. At Pluto, we are, as I mentioned earlier, I make the use of the term workflow a lot, but we're genuinely, extremely laser focused, not on just being known as a corporate card company, but rather a company that is streamlining payment workflows. And that's the area we're focused on the most, right? A lot of plays like us, have the ambition of, again, the other players that you mentioned right now are either incumbents or banks introducing the capability to create multiple cards with spending limits, or like globally we've seen a ton of similar plays that have the ambition of becoming a bank. We don't have the ambition of becoming a bank. We're here purely to facilitate a tool for finance teams that encompasses a ton of different tools that they use today into one single place with streamlined workflows. For example, today finance teams use multiple tools, as I mentioned earlier, just to authorize purchases, right? Where there's there's a purchase request that's initiated. There's somebody who approves it. Eventually, once the payment is done, the data has to move between different platforms, etc. The key piece with us is no matter whatever. I mean, obviously today we started off with the first wedge, which is operational spending, and really catering to that wedge through the corporate card. But the corporate card for us is just a vehicle. What we're building beneath, which is the policy engines, the approval matrices within the platform, the ability to move all of that data, from your bank account all the way to your accounting tool or ERP. That is, that's a real meaty piece behind Pluto. Again, to sum up, the card, the card is just a vehicle, and we'll continue building different payment workflows no matter whatever they are. Today we'll start off with this. Eventually, we're going to move on to vendor payments. We'll move on to partner payouts. Pretty much all the different payment workflows that our customers go through.
Last question before I hand back to Mr. Ronit. 3 years from now, 4 years from now, like, how many countries do you see Pluto in? Do you see it being a company that you can scale easily into other markets with regulation, issuing requirements, building teams? I know COVID is over for most of us, and that's great for people to move around. But it doesn't mean it's become any easier to stitch together a fragmented ecosystem, right? We're not the United States. We're not, these are, similar ecosystems. This region really takes a lot of time to bring fragmented ecosystems together. Is Pluto going to be able to manage to go across country in, say, 2-3 years time easily, or is it going to be something you think is going to take longer?
Totally. So I'm going to start off with the team standpoint, right? So today, while we are an 11-month-old company, we've got team members that span across the UAE, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Toronto, New York, San Francisco, somewhere else, Jordan, right?
How Web3 of you, as Ronit would say. Ronit, can I say that? You saw it coming? Can I call you how Web3 of you? Can I say that?
So you can say whatever you want to, my friend. Great.
It's a Ronit phrase. I can't steal it. I can't steal it.
Decentralized.
Yeah, it's a Ronit phrase.
Right?
I'm gonna jump in on that. Cool.
And again, I'm a strong believer of building remote teams. And again, it's easier, it is easier said than done, because there's a lot of effort that, that goes into mimicking the in-person experience online. For example, at Pluto, every 2 weeks, we host virtual parties on a tool called Gather, where every member is literally with their mouse and keyboard in a different environment that we set up virtually. It could be a virtual bar, a coffee shop, an office, and
Where's our invite? I want to come to this cool virtual party place. Ronit, can we crash this party?
That's a great idea. We should definitely host a virtual party for investors. So I think that's definitely going to be on the agenda. Now, so we like I would say from day one. We've really optimized on bringing on the greatest people around the world, no matter wherever they are. In terms of a fragmented ecosystem, that is correct, right? And I think 3 years from now, one of our biggest moats are going to be interoperability across the different countries that that we're building in. Again, there are a couple of challenges here, right? One is, not only is this a fragmented ecosystem on a regulatory and underlying payment rails landscape, but there are different cultures as well. The culture in Pakistan versus Saudi versus the UAE is extremely different, right? So for us, to answer your question, from the get-go itself, we kicked this company off with the intention of building for MENA. And would we have covered all of MENA within 3 years? Maybe, maybe not. But we will definitely have significant presence across the region.
And with that, thank you, brother. Thanks, Mo, for joining. Mo,
Run
it back to you, brother.
Final question. Mo, you've built at least 2 fintechs so far. Maybe there'll be more in the future. What do you think, for someone who's a builder like you from scratch? Now, Gaurav's a builder too, but he's building on existing foundations. I'm simply sitting here as an observer, teenage scribbler, something, I don't know what, but what do you think differentiates you from a Gaurav or a me or any other person you meet in the street that makes you want to say, I'm not just going to work for Plaid, or I'm not just going to work for an ABC company, I'm going to go and build it myself? Most people go to their sister's wedding and have fun, maybe have too much to eat or drink or hang out with inappropriate people, but you go to your sister's wedding, I'm going to build a new company. What do you think?
Yeah,
what's going on?
So it's 2 things. One, I come from a family background of entrepreneurs. Again, that's the cliche part of this answer. But I think outside of that, if I had to go back to my early days, which is obviously kicking off, creating photographs and filming things I enjoyed, that was the beginning of like me creating or me building, right? And I think just seeing many episodes of success initially, but then also failure after, what that resulted in, it resulted in an addiction, like in this burning addiction to continuing to build and see success out of it. And I think if I had to go back in time, and instead of seeing, like, if my journey was more on the lines of like failure, then I may have given up. But because I'd seen success, then failure, right? I think that plays a very critical role to continuing to come back and build. And in fact, on this question, I was listening to this podcast recently about this guy. I can't remember his name, but this guy who's, who became famous for raising three kids, and all of his three kids grew up to be absolute champions. One became like a continuous Olympic winner at chess, and another two very similar, right? And what was common across all the three kids whom he raised was the fact that when he trained them on a sport or a specific topic, he almost, purposely put them in a position where they won first before they lost. And I think it's in my case, obviously, it was luck that that got me into that sort of situation. But I would go back and attribute it to my past history of building.
Interesting. So early experience of success, tasting what it feels like to win, and then that becomes an addiction. I wanted to repeat these experiences, and maybe there's something in the air as well, or in the blood, or in the DNA. It's there as well. It's
the entrepreneur's bug. He has the bug. He has the bug.
He has the bug, and the yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mo. Thank you so much for joining us today, talking about Pluto and your personal story, and sharing so much.
Cool. Awesome.
Thank you.
Have a nice one, guys.